Remember when Jerry's apartment, a diner booth, and a door became the most famous real estate in television history? Seinfeld was the show about nothing that earned billions, and almost none of it went according to plan. Today, we're counting down 20 weird facts you never knew about Seinfeld. Number 20. Jason Alexander walked into his audition for Seinfeld with no idea who George Costanza was supposed to be. He got a few script pages, no context, no character breakdown. So he made a choice. He told Howard Stern years later, "It read like a Woody Allen film, so I did the glasses, and as blatant a Woody Allen as I could do." The casting team told him to drop the Woody Allen impression, but keep the neurotic energy. Here's the thing though, before Alexander even got that callback, the role was offered to some massive names, who all said no. Danny DeVito passed on it, thought the role was beneath him. Paul Schaffer got a voicemail from Jerry Seinfeld himself offering him the part without even auditioning. He never called back. Chris Rock was in the mix, but they thought he was too young at 24. David Alan Grier auditioned and immediately told his friends the show would never go anywhere. Jerry's real-life friend Larry Miller was the final competition. Miller ended up on the show later as the doorman, so Alexander got the role doing his best Woody Allen, which is ironic because George Costanza wasn't based on Woody Allen at all. He was based entirely on Larry David's actual personality. Every time you watch George spiral into some paranoid rant about nothing, you're watching Larry David's self-portrait performed by an actor doing a Woody Allen impression. Number 19. When the Seinfeld pilot aired in 1989, there was no Elaine Beans. Jerry's companion in the diner was a waitress named Claire, played by Lee Garlington. She was fine. The pilot was not. After NBC screened it, they had notes. Actually, they had one note. Castle Rock Entertainment chief Alan Horn recalled to Variety that NBC's entire feedback was this: put a girl in it. So Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld went back and created Elaine Beans, Jerry's ex-girlfriend who stayed friends with him. A concept that was pretty radical for 1989 sitcoms. The search began. Rosie O'Donnell auditioned. Patricia Heaton auditioned. Megan Mullally came very close. Seinfeld told Howard Stern that Mullally was very close, and they seriously considered her. Then, Julia Louis-Dreyfus walked in. She was a former Saturday Night Live cast member who already knew Larry David from their time at SNL together. Seinfeld said he knew within 30 seconds that she was Elaine. Louis-Dreyfus told Oprah years later that the audition felt casual because the show only had a 4-episode order and nobody thought it was really going anywhere. All 3 of the runners-up went on to lead their own hit series. One of the most iconic female characters in sitcom history only exists because NBC gave a single network note, which raises the question, what other iconic moments were complete accidents? Number 18. Kramer made 291 entrances through Jerry's apartment door across 9 seasons. Every single one of them. That iconic slide, the burst of energy, traces back to one mistake. Michael Richards told Charlie Rose that during an early episode, he was late on his cue. He wasn't where he was supposed to be. So I came in to catch up with the scene. Something was happening very quickly and I come bolting in and it got a laugh. Richards institutionalized it. He escalated the slide across 9 seasons, making it bigger, weirder, more physical. The crew had to keep extra door hinges on hand because Richards' entrances literally destroyed the front door 3 times during production. The show also made a decision that almost never happens in sitcoms. They assigned Richards a dedicated 4th camera. Seinfeld was a 3-camera sitcom. Most sitcoms are. But they added a 4th camera just for Richards because his physical comedy was so unpredictable, they needed to stay wide and capture whatever chaos he was about to create. Jerry Seinfeld claimed during a Reddit AMA in 2013 that the cast hardly ever improvised. But Richards himself told Oprah that Kramer's vocal quirks, all those pops, clicks, whoops, and whistles, were entirely his invention, never scripted, never written. The most recognizable entrance in sitcom history happened because an actor missed his mark and was trying to catch up, and the production team had to build the entire show around his chaos. Number 17. When George's father first appeared in season 4 in the episode The Handicap Spot, he was played by John Randolph. Randolph brought this quiet, reserved, almost gentle energy to Frank Costanza. Jason Alexander felt it wasn't working. He later said Randolph looked too WASPY to play George's father. For season 5, writer Larry Charles suggested Jerry Stiller for the role. Larry David agreed, but gave Stiller very specific direction. He wanted Frank to be subdued, meek even, to contrast with Estelle Harris's loud, overbearing Estelle Costanza. Stiller tried it. For 4 days, he played Frank exactly how David wanted. Quiet, restrained. It wasn't working at all. Stiller could feel it. He was terrified he was about to be replaced just like Randolph. So in the middle of a scene with Estelle Harris, Stiller made a choice. He started screaming back at her. Larry David's reaction was immediate. "That's it. Keep it that way." Stiller also ditched the bald cap they'd given him. Then David did something almost unheard of in television. He went back and reshot all of Randolph's scenes from season 4 with Jerry Stiller so the character would be consistent in syndication. It's been compared to George Lucas re-editing his films years later. The explosive, screaming Frank Costanza that gave us Festivus, Serenity Now, and some of the show's greatest moments only exist because Jerry Stiller ignored his director's instructions and started yelling. Number 16. Across 12 episodes in seasons 5 through 9, George Costanza worked for the New York Yankees. His boss was team owner George Steinbrenner, who appeared on screen but always from behind, just the back of his head. The voice was manic, rambling, hilarious. That voice was Larry David. Actor Lee Baer performed the physical back-of-head shots, but David provided all the dialogue. The real George Steinbrenner loved it. He told the New York Times, "I was prepared not to like it, but I came away laughing my head off." Steinbrenner was such a good sport about the whole thing that for the season 7 finale, Larry David invited him to film an actual on-camera cameo alongside Jason Alexander and Julia Louis-Dreyfus. They shot it. It didn't work at all. So David had to make what might be the most awkward phone call in sitcom history. He called Steinbrenner and said, "Look, I'm sorry, Mr. Steinbrenner, we have to cut you from the show." David noted later that Steinbrenner didn't seem that disappointed about it. The creative choice ended up being perfect for the show's mythology. George Costanza was based on Larry David. George's boss was literally voiced by Larry David. When you rewatch the Yankees storyline, you're hearing the show's co-creator playing the boss of his own fictional alter ego. And that kind of meta-storytelling came from one unbreakable creative rule. Number 15. Larry David established 2 rules for the Seinfeld writing staff, and they were not negotiable. Rule 1. Characters would never have sentimental reconciliation moments. No hugging. Rule 2. They would never grow or learn from their mistakes. No learning. David told The Atlantic, "If you examine the premises, terrible things happen to people. They lose jobs. Somebody breaks up with a stroke victim. Somebody's told they need a nose job. That's my sensibility." This wasn't a joke. It had teeth. When George's fiancée, Susan Ross, died in season 7 from licking cheap wedding envelopes, George's reaction was complete indifference. He suggested getting coffee. No sadness. No reflection. No growth. The rule made Seinfeld the first mainstream sitcom to completely abandon moral resolution, the thing that had defined the genre since the 1950s. Every sitcom before Seinfeld had characters who learned lessons, hugged it out, grew as people. Seinfeld said no. The characters stayed selfish, petty, and terrible. That philosophy paved the way for anti-hero television. The Sopranos, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, Curb Your Enthusiasm, all of them owe a debt to Larry David's refusal to let his characters be good people. Every time you watch Jerry, George, Elaine, or Kramer do something horrible without consequence, you're watching a creative decision that broke 40 years of sitcom tradition. And that philosophy created constant battles with NBC over what the show could and couldn't do. Number 14. Production designer Thomas Azari built a staggering 1,380 sets across the 9 seasons of Seinfeld. That's more than 150 sets per season. Azari told CBC Radio his philosophy was simple. You write the stuff and we'll make it work. Don't think about production. The writers took him at his word. Jerry's apartment set, the one you remember, was notoriously small. Jason Alexander pointed out years later, if you knew you were doing a series for 9 years, you would have built a bigger apartment. But the real problem wasn't the size. It was the architecture. The hallway in Jerry's apartment was physically impossible. If you follow the layout, the hallway runs straight through where the kitchen would be in real life. The set was designed for camera angles and blocking, not for making any kind of spatial sense. For the season 3 episode, The Parking Garage, the production team made a decision that still sounds insane. They tore down Jerry's entire apartment set and the Monk's Cafe set completely. Then, they built a parking garage on the soundstage, cramming 32 cars onto the stage and surrounding them with mirrors to create the illusion of an endlessly repeating structure. Because there was no room left for the audience bleachers, they had to record the laugh tracks separately by showing the finished episode to a completely different studio audience the following week. Every episode you've ever watched was filmed in a space that violated the basic laws of physics. Number 13. Julia Louis-Dreyfus was pregnant twice during the run of Seinfeld. Once during season 3 when she had her son Henry in 1992, and again during season 8 when she had her son Charlie in 1997. Neither pregnancy was ever written into Elaine's storyline. The reason? Having a baby would constitute character growth and violate the no learning rule. During her first pregnancy in season 3, Louis-Dreyfus hid behind boxes, furniture, and oversized coats. It worked well enough. For her second pregnancy in season 8, things got more complicated. Jerry Seinfeld approached her with what he genuinely thought was a great creative solution. Louis-Dreyfus recounted the conversation years later on Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. Seinfeld came up to her and said, "Hey, I have a great idea. How about we write in this season that Elaine just gets fat?" She burst into tears. Right there on set. She later conceded, in his defense, "I think it's actually a great idea and I should have embraced it. But at the time, no." Instead, season 8 became an exercise in creative blocking. Laundry baskets, overcoats, strategic furniture placement. The incident captures the sometimes tone-deaf dynamics between the male-dominated creative team and their lone female lead. Every time you watch season 8 and see Elaine holding a box or standing behind furniture for no apparent reason, you're watching the creative workaround for a pitch that made the actress cry. Number 12. On May 7, 1998, 1 week before the Seinfeld series finale, an episode called The Puerto Rican Day aired to 38.8 million viewers. In the climactic scene, Kramer accidentally sets a Puerto Rican flag on fire with a sparkler, then stomps it out. Then he says, "It's like this every day in Puerto Rico." The National Puerto Rican Coalition condemned the episode immediately. Protests erupted outside NBC's headquarters at Rockefeller Center in New York. Writer Alec Berg made things worse by telling reporters, "We don't consult a rabbinical council when we do a show about Jews." NBC formally apologized and pulled the episode from all reruns and syndication. It was the only time in the show's history they banned an episode. It wasn't returned to syndication until 2002, 4 years later, and didn't appear on Netflix until 2023. The episode itself is notable for another reason. It had a record 10 writer credits because all of the remaining staff writers collaborated on it as their last episode together, before Larry David returned to write the series finale. The second to last episode ever made became the only one NBC banned from the air. The timing couldn't have been worse because the creative team was already falling apart. The controversy revealed the tension between creative freedom and network responsibility that had defined the show's entire run. Number 11. Starting in season 2, Larry David told Jerry Seinfeld after every single season that he was done, finished, couldn't do it anymore. Jason Alexander explained the pattern on the podcast WTF with Mark Maron. David would say, "It can't be done again. That's it." Every summer, Seinfeld would talk him back into returning for another season. This went on for years. Then came the end of season 7. David told Seinfeld he was quitting again. But this time, Seinfeld's response was different. He said, "Larry, you've been talking about quitting for 7 years. Why don't you just do it this time?" So he did. David told Charlie Rose in 1998, "I'd been there for 7 years, and that's a long time to suffer the way I do in my daily life." Critics and fans noticed an immediate shift in seasons 8 and 9. The grounded, dark, observational humor gave way to more slapstick and absurdist storylines. Writer Alec Berg described the post-David era to Variety as brutal. The staff went 59 consecutive days without a single day off, writing for 33 million viewers every week. Jason Alexander felt the change most acutely. He said the best of George Costanza left when Larry David left, because George was Larry David. David did continue voicing George Steinbrenner remotely from Los Angeles, and he came back to write the series finale. But every episode you watch after season 7 was made without the show's co-creator, the man George was literally based on. All right, we're at the halfway mark, and things are about to get even wilder. Before we hit the top 10, I want to hear from you. What's your favorite Seinfeld quote or moment? Drop it in the comments. And if you're enjoying this, smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Number 10. In season 3, there's an episode called The Pen, where Jerry and Elaine visit Jerry's parents in Florida. George doesn't appear. Kramer doesn't appear. It's just Jerry and Elaine for 22 minutes. Jason Alexander was furious. He confronted Larry David directly and said, "I only want to be here if I'm indispensable. If you write me out again, do it permanently." Michael Richards provided some context in his 2024 memoir, Entrances and Exits. He wrote, "Jason came onto the show with the most confidence of anyone. Until the table read for The Pen, he had assumed that Seinfeld is a buddy show, starring him and Jerry." In a 2020 conversation with Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Alexander admitted his deeper motivations. He He said he was insecure about Julia's increased presence on the show and was very, very glad David didn't call his bluff because he probably would have fired him. The threat worked. George Costanza appeared in every single remaining episode for the next 6 seasons. Alexander never missed another episode, not one. The ultimatum became part of the show's mythology. Alexander's insecurity transformed into George's most defining trait, proving that real creative tensions often fuel the best performances. The threat itself became legendary within the show's production history. But some of the show's most iconic moments didn't come from threats or intimidation. Number 9. In the Season 8 episode Little Kicks, Elaine does one of the worst dances in television history. It's painful to watch. That's the point. Writer Spike Forreston based the entire storyline on watching Lorne Michaels, the creator of Saturday Night Live, dance at an after-party. Jennifer Cation Armstrong wrote in her book Seinfeldia that Forreston observed Michaels dancing as if he'd never seen another human being dance before. Julia Louis-Dreyfus took the assignment seriously. The night before the table read, she auditioned her worst moves for her mother and her husband, who voted on which option looked the most terrible. But the critical breakthrough came during rehearsal. When the music played on set, Louis-Dreyfus instinctively started moving to the beat. It made the dance look too competent, too coordinated. Her solution was radical. She insisted they turn off the music completely. She told her podcast, Wiser Than Me, "I really wanted it to be bad, so I had them turn off the music so that I would dance with no beat at all." They filmed it in total silence. The music was added only in post-production, which means her movements had absolutely zero relationship to any rhythm or timing. One of the most powerful people in television, Lorne Michaels, unknowingly inspired one of the most iconic comedy scenes in TV history. Every time you watch Elaine do that dance, you're watching Julia Louis-Dreyfus moving to complete silence, while the crew desperately tried not to laugh. Number 8. Festivus, the holiday for the rest of us, wasn't invented in the Seinfeld writer's room. It was real. Festivus was created by Daniel O'Keefe Sr. in 1966 and practiced by the family of Seinfeld writer Dan O'Keefe. The real version of Festivus was far stranger and darker than what made it onto the show. It had no fixed date. It could happen at any time during the year. Instead of an aluminum pole, the O'Keefe family had a clock nailed inside a bag hanging on the wall. The family aired their grievances into a tape recorder. Siblings wrestled. And Daniel O'Keefe Sr. played what Dan O'Keefe described as weird French 60s music throughout the entire thing. O'Keefe told reporters bluntly, "It was bleeping weird, man. He never wanted Festivus on the show. He said, I fought against it." His brother accidentally revealed the family tradition at a party that writers Alec Berg and Jeff Schaffer attended. They cornered O'Keefe at a diner later and pressured him to put it in an episode. The aluminum pole? That was Jeff Schaffer's invention for the show. Even the phrase, "a Festivus for the rest of us," was real. It was an actual O'Keefe family motto, but it originally referred to the family members who were still alive after the grandmother died. Every time you celebrate Festivus in December, you're participating in a writer's childhood trauma that he actively tried to keep off television. Number 7. In the Season 4 episode, The Junior Mint, Jerry is dating a woman whose name he can't remember. He only knows that it rhymes with a female body part. The original script used the name Cloris, and Jerry was never supposed to figure it out. That was the joke. He'd never know. But between scenes during the live taping, the warm-up comedian decided to engage the audience. He asked them to guess the name. A woman in the audience shouted, "Dolores!" The entire crowd laughed hard. Writer Andy Robin told HuffPost, "When the audience members shouted it out and the audience laughed, it was like, this is a great exclamation to put on the end." Jerry Seinfeld was standing right there. He approved a script change on the spot. They rewrote the final scene immediately. The scene where Jerry leans out his apartment window and yells, "Dolores," into the street was filmed that same night with the new line. A producer later overheard the woman's husband saying to her, "You guessed right?" It remains the only known instance in Seinfeld's entire run where a fan, a random audience member, essentially wrote a line that made it into the final episode. Every time you hear Jerry yell "Dolores" out that window, you're hearing a punchline that came from someone who paid for a ticket to watch a taping. And she wasn't the only person improvising iconic lines on the spot. Number 6. In the Season 4 episode, The Implant, Jerry starts dating a woman named Sidra, played by Terry Hatcher. The entire episode revolves around whether or not Sidra's physical appearance is natural. At the end, Sidra breaks up with Jerry. The original script had her parting line to Jerry as simply, "And by the way, they're real. That was it. But during the live taping, something changed. Larry David was known for feeding actors new lines between takes, whispering adjustments right before the cameras rolled. He came up with an addition on the spot and whispered it to Terry Hatcher. She told Rolling Stone in 2014, "When you were taping in front of a live audience, Larry would feed you lines. He'd say, 'Okay, go through the door, turn this way, and say this.' I remember that being one of the lines he fed me. I don't think it was the original script. I'm pretty sure he just came up with it on the spot." The line became so iconic that Hatcher said, "Those 5 words will probably be what ends up on my tombstone." 5 unscripted words, invented between takes, whispered to an actress seconds before action, and they became one of the most quoted lines in sitcom history. Every time you quote, "They're real and they're spectacular," you're quoting something Larry David improvised in the moment and fed to Terry Hatcher while the cameras were resetting. But not every last-minute decision actually made it to the screen. Number 5. In Season 2, writer Larry Charles scripted an episode called The Bet, where Elaine decides to buy a gun for self-protection. Sets were built, guest actors were cast, including Ernie Sabella as the gun shop dealer. The table read was scheduled for December 12, 1990. Everything was moving forward. Then the cast read the script out loud. The climactic scene had Elaine holding the gun to her own head and saying to Jerry, "Where do you want it, Jerry? The Kennedy?" Then she'd point the gun at her stomach and say, "The McKinley?" Julia Louis-Dreyfus turned to Jason Alexander and said flatly, "I'm not doing this." Director Tom Chironas agreed with her immediately. He said, "In my opinion, guns aren't funny." Michael Richards was the only cast member who seemed unfazed. He joked, "Why not? I think Kramer could justify the use of the weapon." The episode was scrapped, the only time in the show's entire run that the cast vetoed a script and refused to film it. Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld wrote a replacement episode called The Phone Message in 2 days to fill the slot. The original script also would have revealed Kramer's first name as Conrad instead of Cosmo, which means that detail of the show's mythology was rewritten because of this veto. Larry Charles confirmed the leaked script's authenticity when it surfaced online in 2024. The only Seinfeld episode that never aired exists because the actors looked at each other and said no. Number 4. Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld wrote an episode for Season 2 that took place entirely in a Chinese restaurant lobby. Real time. 23 minutes of Jerry, George, and Elaine waiting for a table. Nothing else happens. NBC executives read the script and lost their minds. Warren Littlefield, an NBC executive, recalled, "I read that script and I went, nothing happens? Am I missing pages?" Jason Alexander said the network's reaction was conveyed to the cast and writers as, "How dare you people try and pull something off like this?" NBC wanted major changes. Larry David made a decision. He told them he would quit the show if they forced him to rewrite it. Jerry Seinfeld backed him completely. NBC relented, but buried the episode near the end of the season, hoping no one would notice. The episode became a turning point. Jason Alexander later called it the defining beginning of the anarchy of Seinfeld. Think about what was at stake here. If David had backed down, if NBC had won that fight, the show never makes the parking garage, never makes the contest, never makes the backwards episode. All of the experimental boundary-pushing episodes that defined Seinfeld as something different only exist because Larry David threatened to walk away over a bottle episode about waiting for a table. A single writer's ultimatum established the show about nothing as more than just a marketing slogan. It became the creative identity. Every experimental Seinfeld episode you've ever loved exists because one man refused to compromise. Number 3. Season 5. The Marine Biologist, one of the most beloved episodes in the entire series. The original script ended with George Costanza walking into the ocean to save a beached whale, then cutting to Jerry and Kramer sitting in a diner talking about something else. They filmed it that way for the studio audience. The ending fell completely flat. Larry David knew it wasn't working, so he went home that night and rewrote a 2-page monologue. The one that starts with George saying, "The sea was angry that day, my friends, like an old man trying to send back soup at a deli." The monologue brilliantly connected 2 completely unrelated storylines from earlier in the episode by revealing that the golf ball Kramer had been hitting into the ocean was the thing lodged in the whale's blowhole. Jason Alexander was handed the pages and told to memorize them in minutes. They ran through the monologue once for the cameras without the audience present just to block it out. Then they brought the audience back in and performed it one time, one single take. That's the take that aired. Jerry Seinfeld said years later that his shocked reaction was completely genuine. He wasn't acting. He was marveling at Jason Alexander's ability to pull that off. What you're watching, what's widely considered the finest comedic monologue in television history, was a 2 a.m. emergency rewrite that Jason Alexander memorized in minutes and performed cold in one take. Number 2, April 27, 1989. NBC screened the pilot episode, The Seinfeld Chronicles, for a test audience of 400 households. Standard procedure: get audience feedback. See if the show has potential. The results came back. They were catastrophic. Warren Littlefield, an NBC executive, said years later, "In the history of pilot reports, Seinfeld has got to be one of the worst of all time." The research memo was brutal. No segment of the audience was eager to watch the show again. None of the supporting characters were particularly liked. You can't get too excited about going to the laundromat. The pilot was rated weak on NBC's internal scale, and one veteran executive later recalled, "This was a weak week." As in, even by the standards of weak pilots, this one was especially bad. NBC president Brandon Tartikoff dismissed the entire concept as too New York, too Jewish. The show was dead. Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David didn't even see the research memo until years later, when Seinfeld was already a massive hit. When they finally read it, they both hung it up near their toilets as a joke. Every episode of Seinfeld, all 9 seasons, all 180 episodes, exists despite test audiences calling it the worst pilot NBC had ever screened. And the only reason the show survived was because of one executive who decided to bet everything on it. Number 1, after the pilot tested as the worst in NBC history, the show should have been canceled. That was the logical move. But Rick Ludwin changed everything. Ludwin was NBC's vice president of late night and specials. He wasn't even a sitcom executive. He had no business greenlighting a sitcom, but he believed in it. So Ludwin made the most consequential decision in the history of television comedy. He reallocated money from his own department's budget. He canceled a planned Bob Hope special that was already in development. And he used that money to fund a 4-episode order of Seinfeld. It was the smallest sitcom order in American television history. When Rick Ludwin called Jerry Seinfeld to give him the news, Jerry asked him, "In the history of television, has anything ever worked with a 4-episode order?" Ludwin replied, "I don't know. 4 episodes. That's all they got." The show went on to earn NBC more than $2 billion over 9 seasons. Phil Rosenthal of the Chicago Tribune wrote simply, "Without Ludwin, there would be no Seinfeld." When Rick Ludwin died in 2019, comedian John Mulaney tweeted, "He never bragged that he paid for the Seinfeld pilot from his late-night budget when NBC wouldn't, but he did that." Every episode of Seinfeld exists because one executive from the wrong department canceled a Bob Hope special and bet his entire career on the worst testing pilot in network history. Seinfeld was a show defined by productive friction between creators and the network, between scripts and spontaneity, between a comedian who couldn't stop laughing on camera and trained actors who turned that limitation into a creative strength. Nearly every iconic moment you remember emerged from some form of constraint. A writer's childhood trauma repurposed as a fictional holiday. An audience member who guessed a better punchline than the professionals wrote. The show's genius wasn't just Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld's vision, it was their willingness to let accidents, arguments, and last-minute panic improve what they had planned. The worst testing pilot in NBC history became the most profitable sitcom ever made. If this video surprised you, drop your favorite fact in the comments, like, subscribe, and share this with someone who loves this show. And as always, no soup for you. We'll see you next time.